Welcome, and please have a sit. Why does the dinner table, that half-hour window with the people who are supposed to know you best, sometimes feel like the heaviest performance of the entire day? Most of us spend the whole day waiting to get home, and then we get there and realize the rest hasn't actually started. You've just clocked into a second shift, one where you have to be a partner, a parent, a present human being for the people you love. And somehow, after giving everything you had to people who don't even know your middle name, that's the harder ask. That's what I want to sit with today. There's a very specific thing that happens the moment you cross into your home. All day, you've been a version of yourself the world understands, the professional, the one who handles things, navigates the noise, gets it done. You had a kind of distance up, the kind you need just to get through the day. But the moment you walk into the kitchen and hear the sounds of the evening starting, you realize that distance isn't allowed here. You're expected to be soft now, accessible. And after 8 hours of giving your energy to people who don't even know your middle name, there's very little of it left. That gap between who you were out there and who you're supposed to be in here is where it starts to get heavy. You want to be the person they deserve. You want to walk in and be present, light, genuinely available, but instead you just feel hollow. You see the chairs pulled out, the table set, and instead of feeling like you belong, you feel demand, an unspoken requirement to be on, to adjust your face, to shake off the weight of a day that had nothing to do with these people and find a way to show up for them anyway. We feel a deep shame about this. We think that if we truly loved the people at that table, coming home would feel like relief. We think the dinner table should be where the stress melts. But for a lot of us, the dinner table is where the stress becomes visible, where the performance of the day doesn't end, it just changes costume. The performance usually finds its rhythm with one question, the most common question in the world. How was your day? On the surface, it's a caring thing to ask. Someone wants to know. But when you're sitting there trying to process the volume of everything that happened since morning, that question feels like an invitation to a conversation you don't have the capacity to lead. You don't want to bring any of it into this room. You don't want to explain the emails, the passive comments, the slow erosion of a Tuesday. So you reach for the script. It was fine. Busy, but okay. Yours? And the dance begins. Safe topics, the grocery list, the kids' schedule, plans for the weekend. You're keeping the conversation level, making sure nothing you say opens a door you don't have the energy to walk through tonight. Because a real conversation requires something from you, and right now, you don't have it. There's a tightness that comes with swallowing your food alongside everything you're choosing not to say. You notice small things, not because they're interesting, but because they're filling the space where your honesty used to be. And here's the strange part. The better the dinner goes, the smoother, the easier, the more pleasant, the more successful the performance has been. The more of yourself you've kept out of the room, the more normal the evening feels. You're trading real connection for a manageable meal. And the cost of that trade is a particular kind of loneliness that grows quietly, right there at your own table, surrounded by people who would want to know, if only they knew there was something to know. There's a moment, maybe you've had it, where you catch a glimpse of yourself, in a dark window, in the reflection of something near the table, and you see the home version of you, smiling at the right times, nodding while the mind is somewhere else entirely. And you don't quite recognize that person, not in a dramatic way, just in a quiet, unsettling way, a stranger in your own evening. What sits underneath that is specific. It's the fear that if you stopped, if you let the performance drop, if you showed how tired you actually are, or how absent you've been for the last hour, something would crack. Something the whole structure depends on. So you don't stop. You keep going. You ask the follow-up questions. You hold the atmosphere steady, and you do it well, because you've been doing it for a long time. But you start to wonder if they're doing the same thing. You look at the person across from you, and you see them choosing their words, holding something back, keeping their edges tucked in so the evening stays smooth. And you realize the whole table might be doing this. A room full of people who love each other, all performing satisfaction so that no one else has to feel the weight of the collective exhaustion. You've built a life together for the functional version of everyone, but there's no room at the table for the version that's actually tired tonight. Here's one of the heavier things about the dinner table, one that doesn't get named much. When the people you're with are genuinely good to you, when they've made the meal, when they're looking at you with real affection, when there is nothing wrong between you, the pressure to be on becomes even greater. If they were difficult, you'd have a reason to pull away, but they're not. They're kind. They're interested. They're doing everything right. And so you feel you owe them a good version of yourself in return. Like their kindness is a debt you have to pay back with emotional energy you don't have. You look at them and you see their hope for the evening, their need for connection, their genuine desire to share the day with you. And you realize that your exhaustion is a threat to that. So you push it down. You perform the interest. You ask questions about things that, in that moment, you have nothing left to give to. Your love for them has quietly become a reason to hide from them. And over time, something starts to build underneath that. Not anger at them. They haven't done anything wrong. More like a low, quiet resentment at the situation itself, at the requirement. You find yourself wishing, just for one night, they were a little less interested, just so you could have permission to be empty without it meaning something. That's not a comfortable thing to notice about yourself, but it's a real one. And it makes sense, because being truly seen by the people who love you can start to feel less like comfort and more like something to manage. Home isn't always the soft place we were promised. Sometimes it's the place where we carry our heaviest presentations, because the stakes are higher there than anywhere else. The people at that table are the ones we can't afford to lose, so we protect the version of ourselves they depend on. We show up. We stay steady. We keep the evening intact. And that's not nothing. That's a real thing people do for each other, quietly, without acknowledgement, most evenings of their lives. But it's also worth noticing what stays at the table after everyone's gone to bed. The things you didn't say. The version of the day that never made it into the room. The person underneath who did all that work to keep things smooth, and who nobody thought to check on, because they always seem fine. That person did a long shift tonight, at the office and then again at home, and nobody saw the second one. So if something in this felt familiar, if the dinner table came back to you somewhere in the middle of this, that recognition is real. It doesn't mean you're failing the people you love. It doesn't mean the relationship is broken. It just means you've been running a long shift, at the office and then again at home. And the second one is invisible because you do it too well for anyone to notice it's happening. You can just sit with that tonight. You don't have to do anything with it. That's enough for today. And the question for us is, what is the one thing you wanted to say at the dinner table tonight that you'll probably end up keeping to yourself instead?